Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard. I'll be your host today, Matt. You can follow me on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Kev, who you can follow on Twitter, Dynasty_GOAT. Kev, how are you, mate?
Pretty good, Matt. Yeah, it's been my first day back at work after the Super Bowl. So, as you can imagine, pretty tired after missing just one day. So, yeah, just what a game it was, and looking forward to talking about some football now.
Yeah, you're very lucky, mate, because I was working yesterday. 3 hours sleep I had, so if I make it through the show, it'll be a miracle because I'm already half asleep. So
I feel very privileged.
Yeah, so that's just a disclaimer, really. If I make any mistakes tonight, so yeah, as Kev says, this episode we're going to recap the Super Bowl and then also recap the playoffs and some players that stood out to us in the playoff games and talk about them from a dynasty perspective. So, as Kev said, we'll kick off with the Super Bowl. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking this one and taking the crown this year with a 31-9 victory. Quite a surprising win, really, Kev. Quite comfortable for the Buccaneers. Obviously, the defense was fantastic, kept Mahomes and co at bay all evening. And Tom Brady proving all the doubters wrong and claiming his 7th Super Bowl ring. So before we kick off, Kev, I just wanted to get your opinion on this and see if you agree or not. Can we say that Brady is officially the unquestionable GOAT?
I mean, I can't believe you asked me this, knowing I'm not his biggest fan. No, I think without a doubt, he's got a GOAT resume, and with all the accolades he's won, winning a Super Bowl on a new team in a time where there's been no off season as well. So you just got to applaud him for that. Really, what a performance! Yeah, and he's also won it after leaving one of the best coaches ever to coach in Bill Belichick. And then the other side of it is the longevity. His first Super Bowl win was back in 2001, and he's won it 7 times. So he has got the GOAT resume for me, but there's a flip to that where he's never done it with a poor O-line or without a top 10 defense. So I do think he is the GOAT, but the teams that have been built around him have been outstanding for me, and it seems that that's always underappreciated about the supporting cast he's had. I mean, if you switch Brady onto the Chiefs on Sunday, probably gets panned by about 40 points. I think that the defense and the O-line were so good that I think Mahomes did so well to keep them that close, I think, even though they got hammered by 20 points.
I think I agree with you, to be honest. As you say, not really much Mahomes could do, could they? The Buccaneers just dominating on defense, as they have. They've done it all year, haven't they, really? They've been solid all year, just said. So also seen quite a lot of people saying he's now the unquestionable GOAT in all sports. I think that's a bit of a stretch for me. I'm quite into my golf. I think Tiger Woods for me is the unquestionable number 1 GOAT in all sports.
I think he's got to be up there definitely for what he's done over that time period on 2 different teams. But it is worth remembering he's 0-3 against NFC East teams in Super Bowl. So that's a big pat on the back to both of our teams, as you can see.
Yeah, we'll never forget when the Giants beat the Patriots in that Super Bowl. So we might as well kick straight off then, Kevin. Do you want to let me know who the first guy you want to talk about is?
Yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes. I think it was obviously it was a record-breaking performance for last year's Super Bowl MVP, but for this time it was the wrong reasons. 9.1 fantasy points was the lowest fantasy performance of his career. 52.3 passer rating, again, the lowest of his career. It's his first career game with a loss by more than 1 score, and also 9 points scored on offense, again, is the lowest of his career. But like we mentioned a little bit before, Todd Bowles and the Tampa D was outstanding. 2 interceptions, 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, plus they hold Mahomes and this team to 9 points. I want to know how a defensive player like Devin White has not won the MVP after a performance like that. And I kind of felt sorry for Mahomes. It was a perfect storm against him. The elite defensive play from the Bucs, receivers dropping passes or letting it hit him in the face, penalties, losing his offensive tackle, poor play calling. It was a recipe for disaster for Mahomes. A couple of times just making throws like White Goodman in dodgeball. And if he connects on that pass where he's laying out horizontally and throwing it midair, that's the greatest Super Bowl touchdown ever. But I guess with
Mahomes' fault, was it really, that one? It him square in the face.
I just don't know how he can do that.
It's unreal.
It is unreal, like you say. But I think what I want to get your take on is, with the Super Bowl etched in people's memories, is there a chance that dynasty players overthink it and start to fade Mahomes in their start of drafts?
Potentially, but I think if they do, they're crazy, aren't they? I mean, how can you finish the QB4 in the regular season? As you say, his talent is, it just proves it every game. It does something that just makes you think, wow, what an unbelievable quarterback he is. Obviously, he's on this offense, which I think can be dominant for years to come. So all that points in his favor. He's still only young as well, 25 years old. So got plenty of years left in him. And I think he can be top 3 for the next 5-10 years easily. So yeah, for me, he's comfortably the QB1 in Dynasty. I think if I'm in any startups, I'm taking him as my first quarterback. That is for sure. Anyway, what do you think of?
Yeah, he's still clearly the QB1 for me. I think he's still in a tier on his own. Just with, like you say, the youth and the weapons, the talent he's got, he's going to be around as a top QB for years to come. So yeah, I'd agree with that. Still comfortably QB1 for me. I won't be fading him, definitely. But if there was someone to challenge him for the QB1, who would that be for you?
I think I'd have to go Kyler Murray if I was going to pick somebody to join him up there. Obviously, he's had another great year this year, finished as a quarterback 3. Again, if we're going on age, he's only 23, so he could have plenty of years in him as well. He's on this offense with the Cardinals. That's an air raid offense. He's going to be throwing the ball plenty, and he's got arguably one of the best wide receivers to play the game in DeAndre Hopkins alongside him. So, I mean, it's all there for him. The ingredients are all there for him to be a top quarterback for years. And he's got that ability on with his legs as well. He's basically a mixture between Lamar and Mahomes. Is an unreal quarterback. If you were going to have any concerns, it might be that he's only obviously quite a small quarterback. And we saw it in the last game that he played. He picked up that injury. That is always a risk when you're talking about quarterbacks that run the ball. But yeah, for me, I think it's got to be Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I like Josh Allen. I think he made a tremendous strides last season, but I won't argue with you saying Murray. I think they're very, very similar. It's a coin flip between those two.
So do you have Allen right up there with Mahomes and in your rankings?
No, I have Mahomes in his own tier, but then just behind him, it's Allen and Murray. Right. I think it's a coin flip. It sort of depends, I guess, how much exposure you've got on your teams to those guys, but you'd be happy with either one of those.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So we'll move on to my player then from the Super Bowl, and I'd just like to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm laughing because if you follow me on Twitter, I caught a bit of heat off the Clyde Edwards-Helaire fan club, talking about my favourite rookie, Michael Carter, and comparing him to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, saying that he was arguably going to be better than what Helaire was in his rookie season. So yeah, caught a bit of stick on that one, but he had a great Super Bowl performance. Obviously, he did have that ankle injury week 15, and he didn't play in the championship round against Buffalo. I'm sorry, he didn't play until that game. And when he did play that game, he had just 6 carries for 7 yards and a touchdown. So that wasn't a brilliant game, but he's then come back in the Super Bowl, bounced back. He had 9 carries for 64 yards, which was 7.1 yards per carry. And he also had 2 receptions for 23 yards. And if you were on Twitter while watching the Super Bowl, you just saw all the Clyde Edwards-Helaire troopers just come out of the woodworks and turn how he's the RB1 and what have you. But yeah, he had a fantastic game. Obviously, we know the trouble that the Chiefs had with that O-line. So again, that's just going to show how well he was actually playing. But yeah, it was a solid finish, but on what was arguably an up and down season for him. Finished as the RB22, averaging 13.5 fantasy points per game. So not bad, but when we're talking about his ADP, according to DLF, he was the RB5 in August. So it was just absolutely crazy, the hype that was around him coming into the season. Now he's dropped down to an ADP of RB11. So I think he's now coming down to around that area where I think he's probably a good value, essentially, if you are going to go and acquire Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Recently, we've had the news as well that Damian Williams is expected to return in 2021, so that could potentially hinder Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I think it works well with a guy alongside him, maybe giving him a breather every now and again. We know that he can handle a nice workload, but I think the Chiefs want to be able to pull him out of games every now and again when he's needing a break and just to let him recharge the batteries. But Yeah, I think he's a good player. He's only 21 years old. He's shown flashes, as I say, this year. He's on this high-powered offense with Mahomes. All the signs are there. They're all pointing to him being a good player, especially in Dynasty. So what are you doing, Kev? Is Clyde Edwards-Helaire someone you're targeting in Dynasty, with all the hype, obviously, around the other running backs from this 2020 class? And is he becoming a bit of the forgotten man now out of this class?
I think in terms of targeting, in my head, yes, he's someone I am interested in. I actually thought as a rookie, he was a solid runner. I think the criticism on him was a bit harsh, to be fair. I think I was a little disappointed with him only getting 36 receptions, but when you look back, that's on 13 games. It's still a pretty decent pace. It's going to put him round about the high 40s, 50 mark in catches. I think the goal line carries were overblown. Loads of people have been saying that he had 6 in week 1 and then none the rest of the regular season. But pretty sure he scored a 1-yard touchdown on his only attempt versus the Bills in the playoffs, which that's when you really call upon your main men. I do think there's room for growth. I'm not worried about Damian Williams. I think anybody that sort of followed Edwards-Helaire in the build to the draft last season realised he wasn't going to be a 20-touch a game running back. I think my only reservation is his price, because I do think I would expect him to get him at a value, but his ADP is running back 11, which that's actually bang on where I rank him. So I am happy to own him, but you might not be getting the superb value that you actually think. I think a lot of savvy players have cottoned on that actually is a really good value for you in Dynasty. So I'll throw it back to you, Matt. Is he a target for you, and what would you be willing to give up to acquire him?
Yeah, as I say, I think he is a target, but it all comes down to value, and when we're talking Dynasty, it all goes down to the owner and how they value that player. So yeah, it would be a target for me. I think RB11, as I say, that's right around. It's where it should have been. I think coming into this season, I think the hype just blew it all out of proportion, really, and it was crazy. So yeah, I think RB11's about right. Talking about price to pay, I mean, you know me, Kev, I'm in love with these rookie running backs. Even if they might not be like the top tier for me in the class, I still love them just because of the contract situation, and you know they're going to have that longevity. Whereas if you're talking about the older running backs, the cliff could just appear at any moment. So yeah, I'm always trying to target these kind of players. I'd give up somebody like Josh Jacobs, maybe. I think you could potentially flip. I reckon they're probably about the same in ADP. So if you've got an owner that's maybe not too sure on Clyde Edwards-Helaire and maybe they like the appeal of somebody like Jacobs, I'd be willing to do something like that. But yeah, I'm not willing to go too crazy on him, but I think there's definitely potential. We mentioned it earlier about as well the O-line. I think they've struggled all year with that O-line, and I think a lot of people underestimated how bigger impact that could have had on the Chiefs as a whole. So I think there's definitely potential, but I think, as I say, a lot of owners are becoming clued upon that and potentially hoping to hold him for a bit.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's probably your startups where you've got the best shot in, because in your existing leagues, they've obviously taken Helaire definitely top 4 in the rookie drafts last year. So that you'd like to think they've not given up on him yet, like you did over the weekend. No, it's because you love Michael Carter. We know that.
That's it. Yeah, I tried telling that to all the Clyde Edwards-Helaire troop, but they weren't having it. They were out in full force. They smelled blood and they were after me, Kev.
Indeed, they were.
I think it was you were stoking the fire a little bit as well.
I was instigating it from a few of my burner accounts. Yeah.
Right, so we'll move on to your second player then, Kev.
Yeah, it's Leonard Fournette. I mean, playoff Lenny showed up again, didn't he? It's I don't think any players improved the dynasty stock more throughout the playoffs than Leonard Fournette. So, he took over lead role from Ronald Jones late in the season. I got him in there again, and he's never looked back. I mean, just go through the numbers: 23.2 fantasy points in the wildcard against Washington, 21.7 against the Saints, 18.4 against Packers, and then 23.5 in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. So a 4-game sample. His RB4 overall pace based on the 2020 fantasy season, which is a small sample, but very interesting indeed.
Yeah,
We've got to remember he joined the Bucs late in pre-season Obviously, it's a short off season. He didn't have a great deal of time to learn the playbook, etc. Pretty average regular season, running back 35 before his resurrection in the playoffs. He is an upcoming free agent. He's likely to have plenty of interest on the back of this playoff run, despite him being 26-year-old. But we do know he would like to be back in Tampa Bay, and he has got that early draft capital, which it does show that he has that ability as well. It's not just a fluke that he's had this run in the playoffs. So I want to know from you, Matt, do you think he'll be a week one starter in 2021? And if you own Leonard Fournette, is he a sell or a hold for you in Dynasty?
Yeah, for me personally, I think he's definitely earned himself a contract in 2021 with regards to how he's played in these playoff games. But I can't see him being a starter. I think he's more of a rotational player. I can't see him going back to having that workload that he had when he was with the Jags. I think he's better suited to be more of a rotational running back. I could see him potentially going somewhere like the Lions or maybe the Chargers as a bit of a power back alongside somebody such as Swift or Eckler. I think that'd be a great fit for him to let him be used around the goal line and just being that, as I say, that power back alongside those quick and exciting players. I think I'd sell him if he can get that value, and obviously we know that he's going to have a bit of a spike in value with people thinking that he could potentially stay with Tampa, and if he can carry on how he's done in these playoffs games, I think they're going to get a good return from him. But as I say, for me personally, I just can't ignore the fact that he had a pretty pedestrian regular season, as you said, RB35. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be paying up too much for a running back that's just finished as the RB35 personally. So, yeah, I think I'd sell if there's any hype around him and potentially getting a bit of value for him.
Yeah, I think for me, if he's my running back 3, I'm kind of happy just to sort of see what happens with it and take it from there, really. I think if he's your running back 2, I mean, you'd be trying to sell him, I think, just to get something a bit more stable. Personally, I prefer for him to stay in Tampa from a fantasy point of view. I think if he moves, it's maybe it is to be a starter, but you never know if he's motivated, do you? I mean, he fell out with the Jags, and then he looked like he looked pretty bang average in most of the season. So we know he can turn it on, but he's that the sort of player you really want to be putting a lot of emphasis in on your dynasty teams.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any spots that come to your head, Kev, that you'd like to see him on if he was to leave Tampa?
Very similar to yourself. I think Lions and Chargers immediately spring to mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be anywhere where there's going to be potential volume. I think if you do own him, you want him to move, like your Buffalo, probably. Or your Tampa.
Yeah, let's just hope he stays in Tampa. I'm surprised you want him to stay in Tampa, Kev, because obviously we know that you love a bit of Rojo. So
I do, but I also want to try. I want to try and win.
Right, so we'll move on to my final player then, which was Mike Evans. In the divisional round against the Saints, he just had 1 reception for 3 yards and a touchdown. And in the championship round against the Packers, he had 3 receptions for 51 yards and a touchdown. But then in the Super Bowl, just that 1 reception for 31 yards. So a really up and down playoff run for Mike Evans. But he is just proven to be that constant nuisance. In the Super Bowl, he drew plenty of pass interference penalties from the Chiefs secondary. So, as I say, a complete nuisance with his size and speed. Finishes the wide receiver 11 this year, which, to be honest, I was a bit surprised about when I heard it, because I know I've got him in a few places, and you see those weeks where he has those quiet weeks and you think...
You don't feel like it, did it?
Yeah, you're just like... It's usually them weeks where you play him, and then when you sit him, it's when he tends to have those huge games. But yeah, it was Brady's top red zone target. He had 13 touchdowns in the regular season, which was 4th in the NFL, so dominant target and dominant with his touchdowns. And he finished with another 1,000-yard plus season, which is now his 7th in a row in the NFL. And that's ever since he's been in the NFL. He's just putting up 1,000-yard seasons every season. So unbelievable. Top 25 fantasy wide receiver every year as well. So he's doing it in fantasy as well as in real life. His DLF ADP currently is the wide receiver 15. So you could argue that's probably right about where he should be, given off his performances. But we know that Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown are potentially free agents this year. So he has got that chance of being the alpha once again in 2021. But we do know, obviously, Tom Brady, he's not getting any younger, but he's still showing that he can be a top-level quarterback. So as long as he's there, I think Evans has got that great quarterback. But he's also shown it when he's not had an elite quarterback like Brady. He's shown that he can still put up great fantasy numbers. So, yeah, what are you doing with Evans in Dynasty if you have him, Kev? For me, it's a real tough one because, as I say, he constantly seems to be undervalued, I think, in fantasy.
I mean, first off, you called him the alpha, which got my attention, definitely. I think it's still Godwin for me as the alpha. Even last season, Godwin had 15.8 to Evans 15.5 fantasy points per game, despite battling injuries, and also Evans 13 touchdowns. But on Evans himself, for me personally, I think he's a holding dynasty. Like you say, and he's undervalued despite his success and his consistency year to year. So on that basis, I don't think you'd actually get the correct value for him as a seller. I've got no problem going out to acquire him if you can get him at a fair price. The situation that springs to mind for me is if you're a contending team that's got a late first. I think that matches up really nicely, but you're paying a late first and you're in contention. So he is an ideal win now piece for me.
Yeah,
I have him lower than ADP at wide receiver 19. So I'd likely be getting more of Evans in trades than in dynasty startups. So I guess if you are buying Evans, when would you do it in the off season? Like, is it now? Is it rookie drafts? Is it later on? When do you think is the ideal time to pounce?
It's always a tricky one. Obviously, we like to think we can, but we can't see into the future when it comes to fantasy. Godwin could easily stay with the Buccaneers. I know that Evans even said himself, I think this week, that he's willing to take a pay cut to keep the band together and go for another push next year. So, I mean, if Godwin and Antonio Brown, if they both stay around in Tampa, then you could probably get him a bit cheaper if you wait. I can't imagine him making a move for a wide receiver in the draft. Obviously, if Godwin does leave and Antonio Brown, maybe they could look for somebody in free agency. But I think if I were going to buy him, I think I'd probably do it now. I think I'd make the move now. We know there's a lot of hype now around the rookie picks, and everyone's getting excited about this incoming class. So this is when you tend to get your veterans a bit cheaper, and obviously you can sell high on your draft picks that you have. So yeah, maybe wait just up until before your rookie drafts when those picks hit like peak value. If you're looking to use a pick to grab him and grab him then.
Yeah, I think for me it's definitely no later than rookie drafts. I think maybe even now before free agency, because essentially it's only going to get worse for Evans if you can think like that, with the fact if they re-sign Godwin. Is Antonio Brown a free agent, you say, as well?
Yeah.
So I guess if neither of those sign, then his value is going to go up. So I'd probably do it as soon as. But yeah, I think even if you're doing it at your rookie drafts, that's good as well, because you do get your veterans cheaper at the rookie draft.
Yeah, I think it's always a good time to sell your rookie picks if even when you're right on the clock. If you're thinking, I'm not too sure if I want any of these guys, just ask around about selling those picks, because there's going to be somebody that's trying to grab those picks at that point and they see a player that they want. So yeah, that's definitely the key time for me to go and sell those picks.
You've just got to be brave, haven't you? And hold your nerve and not sell too soon.
It's tough because I know I'm trying to acquire picks. I think everyone's still trying to acquire picks. There's loads of people that are just not for sale, and they're just going to hold and hold. But the temptation does get tough, and people throwing out silly offers. So yeah, you've just got to hold those rookie picks in and just let them. They're still going to grow in value. We haven't hit peak value just yet, I don't think. So it's going to be interesting. Just these talks about rookie picks getting me excited for the incoming NFL draft. Exciting times. So go on then.
I was just going to finally say that with the talent in this class as well, I think now is the year to get some real bargains on your veterans.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll move on then and talk about some of the players that played in the playoffs. whether it be for good or bad, who knows? But who's your first player, Kev?
Yeah, so the first guy that stood out for me in the playoffs is Stephon Diggs. He had a very successful playoffs, 24.8 fantasy points against the Colts, 24.6 against the Ravens, and then he did have a dip in the championship game against the Chiefs, 13.7 points. They are a solid pass defense on the whole. This was on the back of an outstanding first season with the Bills, where he led the league in yards and targets. He was a wide receiver 2 on the season. Now, if we just go back a little bit before the season, he was going as a wide receiver 25 in ADP in your dynasty startups. He's now the wide receiver 7 in startups based on last month's data. So his dynasty stock, it's risen like the new cryptocurrency Dogecoin or Doggy Coin, whatever you call it. But I don't think wide receiver 7 is high enough, though. I think I have him higher. I have him wide receiver 2 in my dynasty rankings. I think it is really close between him, Tyreek Hill, and Devontae Adams. Yeah. But yeah, I've got him really high. I'm mightily impressed with his wide receiver 2 overall season that he had just now. He moved teams, didn't have a pre-season, a camp. He became the alpha, so he moved from being part of a duo in Minnesota to being the main man. I still think he's got touchdown growth as well. He got 8, but if you think Devontae Adams got 18 and Tyreek Hill got 15, I can't see them numbers being sustainable for them. And also, I do think there is a bit of growth there for Diggs. Yeah. His QB as well, Josh Allen, he's not at his ceiling for me. I think he made massive strides this season, but I still think there's even more growth from him if they can improve some of the weapons around him as well. Diggs is currently going in round 3 of startups, which for me, that makes him an absolute steal. I know you won't be as high on Diggs as me, so I want to know where you have him in your rankings, Matt.
Yeah, for me, I've got him at wide receiver 7, so I'm not quite as high as what you are. I still, as you say, I can't put him above guys like Adams, Hill, even players like DK Metcalf. I can't do it, Kev. I can't put him above those guys. Obviously, we know the Bills, they didn't really have a run game this year either. I think that kind of forced them to throw the ball a little more. So you could argue that could be why Diggs had such a great season. But I just think a lot, when I'm putting value on players like this, a lot of weight goes down to the quarterback. And I'm not quite like you when it comes to Josh Allen. I do think he obviously had a brilliant 2020. There's no denying that. I'm not gonna say that he's not a good quarterback, because he's a very good quarterback, but I still think there's just those, you just see it every now and again, those little
glimpses.
Just like, how did he miss that guy? And when you're then comparing it to guys, as we just mentioned, with Adams, Hill, and Metcalf, you talk about their quarterbacks, Rodgers, Mahomes, Russell Wilson. I mean, as good as Allen is, he's not on their level for me anyway. So yeah, that's why I've got him a bit lower than you. Wide receiver 7, I think it's definitely a jump from what he was for me last year, and you'd be silly not to move him up after the year that he had. But yeah, I'm sticking at wide receiver 7 for now, Kev.
Yeah, I kind of get where you're coming from with the running back as well. Like if they had someone decent, I know on the last show, Shane Barrett mentioned Aaron Jones going there. If something like that happens, who's a competent receiver and a great runner, that could potentially harm him, because he's going to be a guy that needs the volume with Josh Allen while he's a bit inconsistent with his throws. Yeah. But yeah, you know where I stand. I'm number 2, you're number 7. Maybe he'll end up somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. I'm probably a bit too low, and you might be a touch too high, Kev.
Yeah, mate. Probably right. We're both smart dudes out. So I just want to know then, what do you think he'd need to do to become the dynasty wide receiver 1 for you? I mean, can he get there?
Well, that's it. It's a tough one. I mean, if he keeps that level of volume that he had this year and carries that into 2021 and puts up another top 5 season, then yeah, you've got to start maybe reconsidering it and saying he could. But it's just tough when you talk about the wide receivers that have just come in, and we're talking about a lot of young wide receivers that have got unreal talent. So as I say, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson as well. They're all young wide receivers that they've just been dominant from day one, really. So I think when it's close like that, you're talking about the performances, and they're all pretty close. I think that's when you now start to maybe consider their age and put the age as a factor. And unless he's got some kind of miracle genie lamp and he can get younger, then I think I'm struggling to put Diggs up as my wide receiver one.
Yeah, I think as well, like if in this case you've got a guy, it can be across any position that's you have in your rankings higher than consensus, it doesn't mean you have to take him with all these other guys. You can sort of work out where he would potentially go and trade down a little bit and still get your guy, so you don't have to go wild and take him at the 101.
Yeah, it's always tough. As I say, it all comes down to how you play the game, I guess. I mean, if you're going to talk in a year's time, are you ever going to be able to trade Diggs for someone like DK Metcalf? He's going to be a year older. DK is going to be a year older, but do you know what I mean? I just think his values. I don't think it's ever going to get any higher. If I'm being honest, he's got to do an unreal 2021 season for me for him to be classed as a more valuable asset than what somebody like DK Metcalf is.
Yeah, he'll have to do it again, won't he?
yeah. If he can just follow it up with another performance like he had this year, then yeah, maybe I can start considering him, but still probably won't. So we'll move on to my play then. It's friend of the show, Kev. We talk about him pretty much every week when he was during the season. It's Cam Akers. God, I just love Cam Akers. He's becoming that. I know. Get a bit hot under collar talking about him. No, it's all just the stars are aligning for Cam Akers. He's becoming that workhorse now for the Rams. In the wildcard week against the Seahawks, he had 176 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. And then in the divisional round against the Packers, he had 96 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown again. So just fantastic performance in the playoffs. 49 touches in those two games. And then Malcolm Brown, he had 11. So, and he's obviously a free agent as well this offseason. So it's just all becoming the Cam Akers show over in LA. Is currently the RB14 in DLF ADP. Still a bit low for me, that I think.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely got room to grow from that. So that would make him the RB5 out of the 2020 class, which is always interesting. Everybody always talks about this class and how they rank him. So it's interesting that he comes in as the RB5 according to DLF. Personally, for me, he's probably the RB3, I think, out of that class. I love Jonathan Taylor and then DeAndre Swift as well. I think both of those guys are still above Akers for me, but he is right up there, especially with Swift. Maybe not touching Jonathan Taylor just yet, but it's just a skill set he has that I'm a big fan of. He's shown that he can make big plays both on the ground and through the air, and I expect now that the Rams are going to control the game a lot more. They've obviously got Matthew Stafford in, so I think they're gonna control games. Obviously the defense as well. We know how good that is. And I just think he could have a huge workload in 2021. We know how much McVay likes to have a workhorse. He's not afraid to give his running backs those big workloads. So knowing what we know now, Kev, where do you rank him out of the 2020 RB class? And what do you see his outlook looking like in 2021?
It's really interesting that he's running back 5 from that class. I'm right there with you. He's running back 3 for me in terms of the rookies behind Taylor and Swift. I mean, Edwards-Helaire and Gibson over him. I like them both, obviously, but I just think Cam Akers over them, it's quite an easy decision for me. Even though they're in the same tier, I just think that like the addition of Stafford helps. I think that's going to be massive for that offense. I think we saw towards the end of the season he's turned into the lead back for the Rams, where Henderson will still be involved, but when I think about, say, Antonio Gibson, I'd be more worried about them keeping J.D. McKissick around and getting 100 targets like he did last season. We knew Akers was raw coming out of Florida State as well. So, I mean, it was expected that he'd have a bit of a struggle. He was playing behind future bin men and Chick-fil-A staff at Florida State, wasn't he? So it was always going to be a longer transition to the pro game. But like we saw, strong finish to the season. Playoffs were very encouraging. I've got Akers as the running back 7 overall in Dynasty right now. Wow. So I'm happy to grab him early in the second round of startups.
Yeah.
In terms of cost for picks, what sort of costs would you be willing to pay to acquire him? First of all, multiple picks. Like, would you do a first and a second, or one pick on its own, for example, the 103? What would you be willing to move?
Yeah, I think if we were talking multiple picks, I think if you could grab him for, well, let's just put it. If we talk about this running back class, I think Akers is. If you're going to compare him, I think he's right up there with Najee Harris. I don't think. I mean, talking on age, I think Akers is not too far off the same age as what Najee Harris is. So
probably younger.
He probably is. Yeah, probably is younger. So I mean, we're expecting him to be the top running back out of the class. So yeah, as you say, if you're giving up a single pick, the 103, it makes sense to me to give that up for him if you can. Multiple picks, I mean, if you can get him, as you say, first and a second, so late first, early second, I think that could potentially get it done. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to give that up to get him. As I said, we mentioned it just a second ago with these rookie picks. If just wait until we get close to them rookie drafts, and who knows what you could get him for. The hype's going to go out of control. You could get him for a single second where the hype's kicking up.
Exactly, and I agree with you. I saw your dynasty tiers earlier today. I think you released it yesterday, didn't you? And yeah, I'd have Akers in that top tier with Najee Harris, and yeah. I'd take above him.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all, to be honest. It's obviously exciting. Everyone's getting, as I say, really excited about these running backs. But I think when you actually look at it and start actually digging into it and thinking about it rather than just getting caught up in all the hype, yeah, I think I would take Akers over all of them. And I think it's going to be an easy trade to make. I think you could get a lot of really good players for this. As I say, a 103, if obviously the top two quarterbacks go in Superflex, I think you can get some really good players just purely off the hype. And everyone's the shiny new toy, don't they? So, yeah. That's
and
it.
You can see people falling in love with one of those consensus top two running backs, or even the likes of a Jamar Chase or a Devonta Smith, or even if you're a bit crazy, Kyle Pitts. So yeah, I'm with you. Akers is good. Running back 7 for me is going to be a steal. I think if you can move him for a 103 or even less.
Yeah, just talking about the hype, just wait until we find out those landing spots. That's when things are going to start getting really crazy. When just imagine like Harris with the Steelers, how much hype there's going to be around players like Harris. Yeah, just hold those picks. I think that's the main thing we're trying to say. Hold your picks.
Indeed.
So we'll move on to your next player then, Kev.
Yeah, it's a disappointing player for me, Jonnu Smith. He had a disappointing end to the fantasy season. His fantasy output in the playoffs in the loss to the Ravens was 2.9 fantasy points. Bit of context, his backup tight end, Ferkser, he had 6.4 fantasy points. To be honest, the season was downhill for Jonnu from week 6 when he got injured against the Texans. At that stage, he was a tight end 3 in fantasy points per game. But over the rest of the season, including the playoffs, he only scored 73 fantasy points. Bearing in mind, over that same time period, his backup Ferkser scored 74.2 fantasy points. So he actually got outscored by a guy playing a lot less snaps than him, who was also a free agent, but definitely going to be cheaper to keep than Jonnu Smith now. As a big Jonnu fan and owner, I'm hoping it was the injury that affected his play all season. If not, it was a really disappointing season for a popular breakout candidate. He finishes a tight end 15 on the year, but like I said, he is entering free agency now. So if you own Jonnu in Dynasty, are you wanting him to stay in Tennessee, or are you wanting him to leave? And if so, where's your ideal landing spot for him?
Yeah, I was just nodding all the way through when you were talking, Kev, because I love Jonnu Smith. He's a guy that I was acquiring everywhere in the offseason. And those first few weeks, I thought I've got potentially a top 3 tight end here, because he just come flying out the gates and it looked fantastic. But as you said, it were all downhill after that. And yeah, really frustrating as an owner and as a fan of him. So yeah, it's a tough one. He's shown flashes of the levels of performances he can have with the Titans. So part of me wants to think it'd be good for him to stay with the Titans, but then we know how much of a run-heavy offense it is, and the fact that they were asking Smith to do a lot of blocking, especially in the run game, it just killed his fantasy value. And I think for that reason, I think I would rather him move on. It's always tough, obviously, when players move teams, but if we can get him on a pass-heavy offense, then I think, yeah, the sky's the limit for him. As regards to potential spots, Green Bay, I think, is a nice spot. Obviously, we know they've got Robert Tonyan, but he is a restricted free agent, so there's potential that they could maybe move on for him. We know how much Rodgers needs some pass catches over with the Packers, so yeah, I think that would be a nice spot. And I think he could give you value quite quickly
Definitely.
with the Packers. Yeah, he's just such a good receiving tight end that I think he can give you instant value. Another one, Patriots. I think that's one that gets mentioned a lot when you're talking about tight ends. Yeah, I know they're in a rebuild, but we know how much Belichick loves Smith. He's mentioned, I reading articles where in playoffs games he talks about his skills, and he barely even talks about his own players in the regards that he talks about Smith. So, I mean, if we can get Smith with the Patriots, they've got quite a lot of cap space as well, I believe. So there's definitely potential for him. If it is money that Smith's after, then there's potential for him to definitely go somewhere like that. Again, talking about pass catchers, New England, they're obviously struggling as well when it comes to that. So, yeah, I think both of them would be great landing spots for Smith. What do you think,
Yeah.
Kev?
Yeah, Patriots was again the first one I thought of just because of the ties to Belichick. I don't want to sound like I'm employed by the Patriots because I know I touted Kenyon Drake a few weeks back to them. So I'm glad you called it and not me to begin with, because I'd have to be declaring a second job, I think. So yeah. Only other thing for me is something that came up in the comments, and it was just from our good friend Nick Sarnelli saying you guys are great. You must have tuned into the wrong channel, I think.
I'll tell you what, Kev, I absolutely love Nick. He's just an absolute legend, and just a brilliant guy all around, and the support he's showed us with this podcast and just generally in the community is just a great guy. So yeah, right back at him.
We love him.
We do indeed. So we'll move on then to my next player, and it's Michael Pittman of the Colts. He had a really big game during the wildcard week against Buffalo, making a couple of big plays, 5 receptions for 90 yards, and he also had 1 rush attempt for 11 yards. And I remember tweeting out, why is this happening? I mean, it was one of my buy lows for the off-season, and he just had to have that one big game, and everybody was getting excited about him, and I just wish he had a bit of a quiet one, and then I could get him a little bit cheap in this off-season. But yeah, he had a great game. But then when we're talking about his regular season performances, it was the wide receiver 79. So a real disappointing rookie season. He did obviously have that leg injury during the seasons. I think he missed a few games because of it. So that obviously derailed any momentum that he had going. Just over 500 yards and a single touchdown on the year. His ADP, according to DLF, is the wide receiver 40 now. For me, he's a buy low at that wide receiver 40 price. I think he's a definite buy low target for me personally. He's a strong receiver with plenty of upside with the skill he possesses. Obviously, he's shown that with his rushing attempts. He's had a few during the season, and he always seems to make plays, whether he is having a rush attempt or, as I say, when he's catching the ball. T.Y. Hilton as well, we know he's a potential free agent, so there's a chance for an expanded role for him in 2021. We know Philip Rivers is obviously retired, so there could maybe be potential for an upgrade at quarterback as well. So what's your feelings on Pittman, Kev? Is he somebody you target? If so, what's his value for you in terms of these rookie picks?
No. Yeah, so I think at his cost, he's not actually someone I would actively go out and try to acquire. I think it was a disappointing rookie season for him. Like you said, the leg injury didn't help, so maybe I am being a little bit too overly critical. I do have him on a roster, and after the week 10 and 11 performances where he was wide receiver 17 and 25, I was buzzing. I was like, here we go. But then he failed to hit double digits rest of the season. So I know he's a rookie, but I do feel against the competition he had, like Zach Pascal and Jack Doyle, T.Y. Hilton. I just wish he'd have kept it going a bit longer, and then I wouldn't be totally out on him. And having said that, I'm not totally out on him. I'm not going to avoid him in drafts or anything like that, but I don't think for me he's an 80 catch season guy or a guy that's going to be super efficient and super consistent on a regular basis. I'd be willing to acquire him for a third rounder, an early third, but I don't think that probably gets it done. I think if you took him last season, it's probably a late second you paid for him.
Yeah,
maybe it might get it done, but I guess probably not. My player comp for him is it's Mike Williams, which is probably why you love him. I know you're a big fan of big Mike Williams, aren't you? So I'm not fully out on him, but I don't like him as much as you like Mike Williams.
I need to stop mentioning any player that people don't like. If I just have one little mention that I think they're all right, they become my new favourite player here. I had it with Soda Michelle all season, and now I've got it with Mike Williams. Jesus. In fairness, I don't think Mike Williams is a bad player. This is a bad actor.
But what I mean is like Pittman and Mike Williams are both, for me, I think the sort of low volume guys, big play guys, touchdown potential, similar mold in that sense, which I think they're all right, but it's not that type of player I want to go for.
Yeah, they're probably one of those guys you could say is more of a better real life player than an actual fantasy player. Like, they can have those big moments, as say somebody like Mike Williams who can have those big plays. It helps your team out, but in regards to fantasy, if he's only doing that once every 3 games, then he's not really helping you out, is he, in terms of fantasy? It's also worth mentioning as well, obviously, Paris Campbell as well for the Colts. He's somebody that I was actually really high on. What's your feelings on just Campbell and Pittman? Who would you prefer out of those 2 guys?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it will come down to whatever QB ends up there.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know, if you've got someone that's willing to throw it around a bit and give his guys a chance, I think Pittman. If you've got someone a little bit more risk averse that's looking for sort of the volume, the high percentage passes, I think Campbell. I mean, if someone like Carson Wentz ends up in Indy, you could see him being sort of used like an Alshon Jeffrey was. So it'd be interesting to see which QB ends up there, and that will sort of determine probably out of those 2 guys actually which one you go for. Because I think for my rankings are pretty similar based on their rankings, so that'll definitely influence my pick. Yeah,
I agree. That is going to be, I think, the key factor, who they get at quarterback. It's really interesting point. Who are they going to get? If they did get someone like Wentz, I think that could be a great move for the Colts. I know a lot of people are low on Wentz, but as you being an Eagles fan, Kev, I'm sure you've got a little soft spot for old Carson Wentz. So
he got done bad by the Eagles, to be honest. I've stuck up for him. He was terrible this season, but he was put in such a bad situation. So I kind of hope he goes elsewhere and succeeds.
Yeah, me too. I do like Carson Wentz. So we'll move on to your next player then, Kev. Who have you got?
Juju can't even speak. Juju Smith-Schuster even. He stood out to me in the Steelers game when they got beat by the Browns 48-37. It was a crazy game. The Steelers were down 28-0 at home in the first quarter. Big Ben had 68 pass attempts, which crazy. I thought it was interesting that in the biggest game of the year, the impending free agent Juju had 19 of those targets, which was the most on the team. And this led to a monster fantasy day, 34.7 fantasy points, his largest output in the last couple of years. But on the season, he was still pretty good, wide receiver 17. It's the 3rd time in 4 years he's been top 20 wide receiver. It does make you think that 2019 season where it was wide receiver 65, that looks like the outlier for him. I think despite Juju having a pretty solid NFL career so far, it does look like he's going to leave Pittsburgh. He is an impending free agent. So where do you think he'll end up in 2021? Where's your preferred destination for him from a dynasty perspective? And where is he in your dynasty rankings as well?
Yeah, I think you actually mentioned this spot, I believe, Kev, the Dolphins. I think, I remember when you mentioned it, I thought that'd be a really nice spot for Juju.
I am a dreamer.
I seem to remember it was when you're talking about this little unknown player called Juju Smith-Schuster. Top players that the Dolphins could target. You found him a nice little hidden gem in Juju. But yeah, I think he could be a great option with the Dolphins. he'll go straight into that slot role and rapidly improve that offense and the pass catches that they have. Another team that I had a little think about this one. I think the Jets. I think that could be a really interesting spot for him. We know they've got plenty of cap room. They're definitely going to be getting an upgrade at quarterback. I think Sam Darnold's going to move on. As much as I do like Sam Darnold, I think they're going to upgrade that quarterback position and grab somebody in the draft. Most likely Justin Fields, but who knows? Anything can happen when it comes to the draft. But yeah, it'd be their new big name wide receiver, and it could be a player that they look to target to begin the turnaround of this franchise. As regards to rankings, it is around that wide receiver 20 mark for me. But a lot of it does depend on landing spot. Obviously, it's tough to rank these players when they are becoming free agents. We don't know what's going to happen and where they're going to land. So there's definitely if he lands in the right situation, there's definitely a chance that he can jump a little bit in my rankings, because we obviously know that the talent is there when it comes down to Juju.
I think Jets are really interesting. I would really like him on the Jets as that sort of alpha wide receiver that does play in the slot, but it would be on the basis that they do move on from Jamison Crowder, because I don't think both would prosper as well being on the same team. But there is talk that Crowder will end up leaving, which I think outside of Denzel Mims on the outside, it's kind of wide open. But yeah, I guess also I would like to see more of Mims in the slot, because I think last year he reminded me a lot of Chris Godwin. So
yeah,
if Juju does go there, they might have to run 4 wide.
I know it is tough because we're both obviously big Denzel Mims fans on this show. So yeah, but I mean, it's going to be. I think it'll be good if Juju did land there for Mims as well. Obviously, I know you did say you'd like to see him in a slot, but I think he's just as good on the outside as well. He can make big plays. Obviously, a big dude, and he's got that speed as well. So yeah, I think his upside is obviously being talked about a lot in the community as a buy low, and I'm fully on board with that one when it comes to Mims.
Yeah, I think if you talk about someone as a buy low for long enough, they become
that is true.
Eventually they become a sell, don't they? So
yeah, they do.
I'm hoping his value does come back down a little bit, because I do like Mims.
Yeah, so we'll look forward to seeing where Juju lands up. So I'll move on to my player then, and it's Michael Thomas of the Saints. In the wildcard round against the Bears, he had 5 receptions, 73 yards and a touchdown, which was obviously a real solid performance. But then he followed it up in the divisional round against the Buccaneers with a big fat goose egg. He had 0 receptions. And that's saying something. You're talking about, obviously, we know how good the Buccaneers are, but the week after, Devontae Adams absolutely lit him up. Carlton Davis, he didn't know where he was when it come to defending against Adams. So yeah, a real shock that he had such a bad performance. And it's been a big fall from grace for Michael Thomas in 2020. Obviously, the wide receiver 1 in DLF ADP back in August. Now he's dropped down to wide receiver 10. Played 7 games, but obviously he had the injuries and he had the off-field problems. So it was all just one big mess really for Michael Thomas. Finishes as a wide receiver 93, averaging 12 fantasy points per game. So, as I say, a big fall from grace from who was the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. Now, obviously, we know Drew Brees is most likely going to retire at the end of this season, so it does become a bit cloudy when it regards to Michael Thomas. And as I mentioned, with the off-field stuff, the diva personality that he has, and he shows it all the time on Twitter, and you just think, a player that good, you don't need to be acting like a 5-year-old child, but
exactly.
He still does. And yeah, when it comes to players like that, those instantly become a concern for me. We've seen it obviously with Antonio Brown. It's just another red flag that you can do without in regards to fantasy. So I just wondered what your feelings were on Thomas. Kev, do you think he can bounce back in 2021? And also, who would you like to be his quarterback? Obviously, out of Taysom Hill, but there's a chance they could re-sign Jameis Winston. Who would you prefer out of those 2 guys?
So first of all, on the bounce back, I think he will bounce back, no doubt about that. I think reaching the heights of 2019 again, I can't see that. I think Breeze has been huge for Michael Thomas as a possession guy, a high volume, efficient receiver in the short game. I think Hill and Winston are not what I would call consistent accurate QBs. I think as well, Michael Thomas did battle the ankle and deltoid injuries throughout the season.
Yeah.
And for as much as he is a weapon on social media, I admire the effort to try and play through these injuries to win a ship with Drew Brees in his final hurrah, we think.
Yeah.
I have him as my wide receiver 8. I am intrigued to see who the QB is on that team. It'd be great if it was someone other than Hill or Winston for me. I think if they pulled a surprise and grabbed, I don't know who, but if they manage to pull something out of the bag and gets an upgrade on him, then he's going to be a steal at a wide receiver 10, I think. If I had to pick just one of Winston or Hill, though, I prefer Winston just because he's more of a proven proven passer in the NFL. He was QB4 in 2019. He had 5,000 pass yards. In fact, I do prefer Winston for the whole Saints offensive players, the offensive skill players in fantasy, just because you've got a higher chance of a more traditional, less gimmicky smoke and mirrors type offense than you would get with Taysom Hill. So Winston for me, but if they somehow manage to, they're pretty good at manipulating the cap out. So if they do pull something off and get an upgrade, then I'd prefer that if they could, please.
They do need a miracle because I know they're in all kinds of problem, aren't they, with that cap space? So it would be an absolute miracle if they could pull it off and grab a top quarterback. Or I literally can't think of how they can do it, to be honest. But we're praying for Michael Thomas that he can get a quarterback that he can get him the ball plenty. Somebody like Drew Brees, obviously. We know how much Drew Brees loves to target Thomas. So it was also interesting as well. I think when Taysom Hill come in, I think he did target Thomas quite a lot. So that is an interesting point. He did seem, obviously, you mentioned about his struggles with accuracy. So somebody like Slant Boy, I mean, we're perfect for him, really, weren't it? A nice, easy target. But yeah, it's all just talking it until we find out really who's going to be that quarterback next season. Then we can start deciding if we think Thomas can reach the heights that he had. But I'm with you. I don't think he's ever going to match up to that 2019 Michael Thomas that we saw. And
I think he is better than just being a sort of short guy, a slant pattern, sort of short and intermediate pass catcher. I think he can do more, but I guess with the way Brees was going with his arm strength in his career, that sort of led to where he was targeting a lot. It would be interesting to see him with a QB that's got a better arm, really, and a higher range of pass routes for him.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll move on to your next player then, Kev. Who have you got?
It's Nick Chubb. I mean, first of all, we'll just talk about the Browns a little bit. Their first playoff appearance since 2002. First playoff win since 1995. They were mighty close to winning on the road at the Chiefs in the divisional round. So I think it's a great effort for a team on the up. Nick Chubb's the guy that stood out for me, though, in the two playoff games. He had the superb game against the Steelers where he had 24.5 fantasy points. But then he had the reverse. He had a real disappointing game against the Chiefs, 9.3 fantasy points. I have always been worried about his pass floor, the fact that he's never gone over 40 catches in a season. He only had 16 in a 12-game season this year, which for me puts him on the same pathway as Derrick Henry. I think he's super talented. He's arguably the best pure rusher in the league. I think he's easy on the eye when he's making his cuts and cutting through a defense as a big dude. And I do think as well the 6 catches he had in the 2 playoff games were really nice. It gives him a pace of 48 on a regular season basis. But yeah, he is entering his age 26 season, which for me it's interesting how he'll be used moving forward. Is he going to be a touchdown dependent running back, one like Derrick Henry, or will he become a 3-down running back for the Browns? What do you reckon, Matt?
Yeah, personally, I don't think he will become a 3-down back. Obviously, as you mentioned, those 13 receptions all season. I think it's just plain as day that he's just not really used in the passing game that much. He did have, as you say, that good receiving day in the wildcard round against the Steelers, but then just 2 receptions for 4 yards in the divisional game. So it's. I'm not sold, Kev. I think it was just maybe the hot hand, maybe in the wildcard round, and he just happened to get those receptions because it was obviously playing well. But I think on the whole, I'm not sold on it. I don't think he will be using the passing game. Obviously, while Kareem Hunt's there as well, I just think those two work well together, being rotated and Hunt getting carries and being used in the passing game as well. So, yeah, for me, I think he's just going to stick more as the main running guy in this backfield. What do you think on it, Kev? Do you think now maybe they are starting to think they can pass it to him a little more, or?
It's really interesting because if you just look at the regular season, you'd say no. But then, yeah, he had the 6 catches in the playoffs. I think the thing that stood out for me watching the Chiefs game is there was a key drive in the second half and they threw it to him twice on that drive and he dropped both passes.
Yeah.
So that was giving him the opportunity to really stand out. And I know we shouldn't sort of take one drive or one game and sort of pigeonhole a guy, but I'm personally worried that he's not going to be a 40 catch guy, and that would make him a real high risk for me. So I guess the thing I want to ask you then, Matt, is with Chubb being a high risk sort of running back, what sort of combination on your dynasty teams would you be worried about? So having him with another running back, is anyone you'd be particularly averse to combining with as your starting running backs?
I think a player that I mentioned earlier, Josh Jacobs. I think if we're talking about like high regarded players, I think if I had him alongside Josh Jacobs, that would be a bit of a concern. They're both obviously not really used much in the passing game. I think Jacobs is a guy that needs a heavy workload to put up those top performances in regards to fantasy. So yeah, somebody like Jacobs, I think that would be one that I'd be considered if I had alongside Chubb. Another guy as well, maybe somebody like Melvin Gordon. Obviously, he's a bit more of an aging running back. So there's probably a chance that you can have a guy like that alongside Chubb if you've spent up to get somebody like Chubb. Yeah, he's another one that there's slight concerns. We know he can catch the ball, but I know this season he's not being used a ton in the passing game, and he's very similar where he needs that workload to be able to put up fantasy numbers. So yeah, you know me, Kev, I love those pass catching running backs. So if I've got one that's not a pass catcher, they need to be really performing on the ground for me to have any confidence in them.
I think I'd actually struggle to take Chubb in the first 2 rounds. I'm not quite 100% on his ADP, but I just think if I was in a draft room, I'd be struggling to take him in round 2, just because, like you said, the flaw, the pass catching flaw. And being honest, it's the same with Derrick Henry. I love Derrick Henry. I've got him on a few dynasty teams, but in startups, I think you want to minimise risk in your first couple of rounds. So it'd be a no for me in the first 2 for him.
Yeah, I just looked and Chubb's the RB9 in ADP, so you probably are looking at that second round area. And I'm like you, Kev. I think I'd rather shoot for the upside in the second round, or if I can get a guy that's got a solid workload, then yeah, I mean it just makes sense, doesn't it, to grab that guy that's being used in both phases of the game.
Or just wait on Michael Carter.
It's going to be a long off season, Kevin. If you're going to be with me about Carter, because you're not going to hear the end of him.
It's going to be same jokes every show. So if you're watching this now or listening, then just be prepared.
Yeah, I won't follow me on Twitter if you don't want to hear about Michael Carter, because he's definitely my crush out of this running back class. So we'll move on to the final player then, and that's Lamar Jackson for me. Wildcard round against the Titans, he only had 179 passing yards, 0 touchdowns and 1 interception. But he does what Lamar Jackson does, and he made up for it in regards rushing the ball. 16 attempts, 136 yards and a touchdown. So, as I say, just what he lacks in passing, he more than made up for in regards running the ball. But then in the divisional round against the Bills, it was a similar performance in regards to throwing it. 162 yards, no touchdowns and an interception. But he couldn't really punish him on the ground. he did pick up that concussion at the end of the third quarter as well. So really disappointing performance for Jackson, and he's somebody that it's mentioned about a lot, and I think it is tough on a guy like Jackson with the talent he does have, but he's now 1-3 in the playoffs, and you do just start to worry about, will it become a mental thing from him if he does keep struggling, and they do keep struggling to get over the line in these games. In regards to fantasy, you'd say it was a disappointment for him. He finished the quarterback 10. But I think the big concern that I think a lot of people have with him is how he is as a passer. We know he's struggled with his accuracy throughout entering the NFL. He's having to use his legs constantly to give you those fantasy points, and we know how brilliant it is having a quarterback that can run the ball. But when you're just relying solely on that, it does become a bit of a concern. I mean, what do we do with a guy like Lamar Jackson? I think also it's begging the question as well, what's his longevity going to be like? A guy that is running it so much, and he's going to be suspect to those hits. He's going to be getting hit, and you just think, how long can his body put up with those kind of hits? I've heard that the Ravens are discussing the potentially extending him this offseason. But in all honesty, I'm just hoping that they grab a wide receiver to help him out. I think that's what he needs. Somebody I tweeted about it not long ago, I think Curtis Samuel, somebody like that can just take those short passes from him and then turn it into a big play. I think that's going to be a huge help for somebody like Jackson. So Kev, what's your feelings on Jackson in the long term? Do you think these new pass catchers would help him, or does it all boil down to his actual ability as a passer?
So long term, I still really like Lamar Jackson. I mean, if you look at my rankings, you probably think I don't like him. He's my QB8 behind the likes of Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert. He's actually in a tier below, but that's because I do my rankings based on right now. I think if they did add an alpha wide receiver, he'd actually jump up into that tier again and be potentially as high as 2 and 3. I do think an alpha receiver would make that much difference. I guess weapons wise, I've never been super high on Marquise Brown. I think Andrews is still a little bit too boom bust for me to be considered right at the top of an elite tight end. But I still do love Lamar's rushing floor. I think he is an average NFL passer in terms of his passing talent, but I think it's also to do with the fact that the Ravens are the lowest pass volume team in the NFL at 42.2% of their plays. Yeah. So for him to take that step, for me, it would have to be an improvement in the weapons, the alpha wide receiver as such, because I don't think they're going to change the philosophy as a run-heavy team. I think someone like Allen Robinson would be pretty decent for me. Yeah. Samuel's a great guy. I think he would help him out, but I want someone right at the top before I'd be willing to put Lamar back into that elite tier at QB. Obviously, the rushing floor is fantastic, but yeah, I'm tempering expectations until he gets that weapon as such. Is there any other guy apart from Samuel you think could be like the high end sort of addition to that team?
I think you made a great point with someone like Allen Robinson. I think he's going to be one of the top wide receivers being discussed when it comes to free agency. I mean, I wouldn't want somebody, we mentioned Juju earlier. I don't think that's the kind of guy that really you'd want on the Ravens, I don't think.
What about like a Kenny Golladay? Would that be someone you'd like?
Yeah, Kenny Golladay, another, obviously a big guy that is one of those where you could just throw it up to him, and with his size and his dominance, he can bring it down. I think that'd be perfect for someone like Jackson. So yeah, Golladay for sure. It's just tough when it comes to Jackson, because as you said, that I think that they built this offense around him using his legs. Obviously, we know how good he is, so why not use what he is best at and running the ball? So I don't think we're ever going to have a situation where we're talking about Jackson putting up those passing yards that players such as Kyler Murray and people like that run the ball. He's never going to be a passer like them, I don't believe. I think they're just going to utilize his strengths running the ball. And I mean, it is good for fantasy. it's what we all chase. I say it all the time. It's what we chase. We want the guys that can run the ball, because you're getting such an advantage with how the point system works in fantasy. If you've got a guy that can run the ball, just 10 yards, you've got a point from a 10-yard run. And when someone like Jackson's putting up 140 yards, that's 14 points just running it. So anything on top of that's always a bonus. And he can still throw touchdowns as well. It's not as if he's struggling to get touchdowns as well as obviously the receiving yards. He's guys like Mark Andrews are getting targeted in the end zone, and he can still find them with the ball. So it's not all doom and gloom when it comes to Jackson. I don't think. I think we are being a little harsh on him that he's fallen back down from that unreal start that he had to his NFL career. But I think as a whole, I think he's a real solid player, and I think now he's becoming a bit more. His ADP is falling in line with where it probably should be now, I think.
Yeah, and I think as well the fact that there's so many good QBs that have emerged, it's not saying Lamar's a bad QB. It's just that there's been so many that have taken the step in the past game, like Josh Allen, or guys that have continued to improve, like Kyler Murray, and he had an outstanding rushing season, didn't he? And then I don't know. I think he's just a little bit low in my rankings because there's guys above him that have done it for a bit longer. Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott. To be honest, it's really close between him and Justin Herbert for me. That will pretty much coin flip, but I just went for Herbert just because I think he is a better passer, and to do that in his rookie season was really impressive. Yeah. But if they had Robinson, I'd take like Lamar over Herbert.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the Ravens do in this offseason, and if they can get him an alpha, as you say, just any kind of upgrades really when it comes to pass catchers, then yeah, it's going to be exciting, I think, for Lamar Jackson. So that's it, Kev. We've come to the end of another show. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter if you don't already, at Fantasy Wildcard. We also have his Linktree site on his Twitter page as well, so you can find all his podcasts and shows on there, on YouTube as well. So please do check it out and subscribe if you aren't already. But yeah, that's it, Kev. All done. Another season in the books as regards to the actual NFL. Yeah, it's been a good one.
Yep, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the show tonight as well, Matt. Thank you as always.
Yeah, been great fun. So that's it. We'll see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Ta-da.